We're now on Daf Samachom Beis. My Beinayu. What's an afkabina between Rav Yehuda and Rav Huna? At the end of the day, they both hold that she can't get married until she's Mekayim the Tanai, because we're always afraid that maybe she won't be Mekayim the Tanai. Ika Beinayu shenikra haget o she'ovad. The question is whether the get has to be in existence at the time of the Chalos Gerushin, and the answer is yes. According to Rav Huna, the get will be Chalam Afreya once she's Mekayim the Tanai. So therefore, we don't care if at the end of that period of time, when she finally forks over the Masayim Zuz, the get gets lost. The Rav Huna, according to Rav Huna, Havi get, the get is Lamafreya, therefore I don't care where the get is or isn't at the time of the Kiyum Tanai. The Rabbi Yehuda, Lo Havi get. In Rabbi Yehuda's frame of reference, the Chalos Gerushin is postponed until she forks over the Masayim Zuz Mekayim the Tanai, and therefore at that moment in time the get is going to be Chal only if the get exists. But if the get is gone, which means Nisraf or Ovad, Nikra or Ovad, then there's no Gerushin. I'm thinking out loud here, we could add another nafkamin. If let's say she had a relationship with another man, would that be Eishes Ish? I mean, according to Rav Huna, it's a suffix Eishes Ish, like the case of David and Bathsheba, right? If Uriah won't come back, etc., etc. But according to Rav Huna, according to Rav Yehuda, it's a Vade Eishes Ish, because the get is not Chal until the Kiyum Tanai. Okay. Now we have to ask the following question. Why is it necessary for Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda to repeat their machlokas twice? Utzricha. We needed both. Diashmin and Gabi Kiddushin. If we only had the machlokas between Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda and Kiddushin, in a case where he says, Almanasha titni li masayim zuz, ve'hakam Rav Huna and Kiddushin, and only in Kiddushin does Rav Huna say that the Kiddushin is Chal immediately. Why? Mishum de likrova likaruva ka'asid. He wants to start this marriage as early as possible because the whole purpose of the marriage is to bring her into his marriage relationship. Perhaps we could suggest that in the case of Gerushin, he wants to postpone the Gerushin as much as possible. And therefore, his intention was that the get should only be Chal at the time of the Kiyum Tanai. Maybe in the meantime, they'll make up lovey-dovey, this pious, and the relationship will continue. Be it Mabahach, and if we only had the Machlokas with regard to Gerushin, we would have said Bahach Ka'amar Afuna. In the case of Gerushin, there's a svara to say that he wants the get to be Chal immediately. Mishum de'iu lo kasav leila mitbah. The Baal is not embarrassed to demand the Masayim Zuz payment from his ex. And therefore, there's no svara to say that we should postpone the Chalos Gerushin, or he wants to postpone the Gerushin until the Kiyum Tanai. He's got it in the bag. He knows that he can press her for the Masayim Zuz. In the case of Kiddushin, after all, the Baal said that he will give a Masayim Zuz. Oh, just 1 second. At this point, I missed before. Second, I missed the point here. Right. Sorry. So again, in Gerushin, she has to fork over the Masayim Zuz. That was the Tanai. In Kiddushin Fakert, he has to fork over the Masayim Zuz. So now in Kiddushin, she's not going to be so keen on demanding the Masayim Zuz. She's embarrassed about that. And therefore, is it possible that she Oh, she wants to postpone the Kiddushin until the time that he gives her the money of Kiddushin. Is therefore Rabbi Yehuda, I might think that the Kiddushin is only chal when she receives the Masayim Zuz. Tzricha, and therefore we need to reiterate that Machlokas both in Gerushin and Kiddushin. Meisvei, we have a Tosefta in the 5th parak of Gittin. It says, "Hamagarish Sishta Yomi said to her, Reisa Gitei Chamanashe Titni Li Masayim Zuz." And the Gemara is now going to raise an objection to Rabbi Yehuda's Shita, because the Brisa says that Afal Pishin is Kara Get or Shavat Areiz Megureshes, which is explicitly like Rav Huna against Rabbi Yehuda. Uli Acher, and as regarding someone else, Lo Tinase Ad Shetitne. Right, so she cannot get married to anyone else until the get is chal. Until, let's say, we know that the get is chal, and when do we know for sure the get is chal? When she gives him the Saim Zuz. Anyway, it says explicitly against Rabbi Yehuda that even if the get was ripped up or lost, she's megureshes because the gerushin is chal mafrei, and that's against Rabbi Yehuda. V'yod, and furthermore, another kash on Rabbi Yehuda. Tanya, we learned in a brisa. Omar Love, the Baal says to his wife, the Baal dies childless. And now we have to know whether the gerushin was chal or not. If the gerushin is chal, she's p'tura min ha'yibum. If the gerushin is not chal, then she falls for yibum. V'nosna, and she fulfills the t'nai of the get, and she forks over Masayim Zuz. Ain's kukal yama. There's no yibum. Means the gerushin is chal. Lo nasna, if on the other hand she doesn't fork over the Masayim Zuz, the Tanai was not makuyim, then there's no gerushin, and it's kukal yama. Reb Shimon Gamliel Omer, he disagrees. He says that even if the Baal dies, there's still a possibility of her being Mekayim the Tanai. And how is that? No senesli achiv oli aviv. She forks over the money to one of the Yarshim, or li echad min akrovin, any other of the krovin that Yarsh. So the Gemara is medayik. Ad kan lo pligi. Where is the machlok stream of the Tanakama Rabbi Shimon? That's only whether you could fulfill the Tanai after his death by giving it to the Yarshim. Ela Tamara, according to Tanakama, Savra leave a lowly Yarshim. The kiyama Tanai was that you fork over 200 zuz to me, not to my Yarshim. Umar Savra Rabbi Shimon Gamliel holds afilu Yarshav, but Kuli Alma Mia Tna. Everybody agrees that he wants to give her the get in a way that'll be chal now, at the moment of Nesinas Haget, and the Masayim Zuz that has to be forked over to him, that's only a Tanai. It's Tiyuv to the Rabbi Yehuda. And now we have a kasha on Rabbi Yehuda. Amar l'cha Rabbi Yehuda, wait a second. We already have established that there's a machlokas Tanoim. Amar l'cha Rabbi Yehuda, even though this brisa proves the Shita of Huna, don't ask me kashas. Why? Hamani, who's the author of this brisa? It's Rebbe. The Omer Rav Huna, Omer Rebbe. Rav Huna says the name of Rebbe. Kala Omer Al Manaska, Omer Me'achshav Dami. Okay, fine. So this price is a clear-cut proof to Shitas Rav Huna, but that's because it's Rebbe, and Rebbe holds Me'achshav Al Manaska is like Me'achshav. I know, but if you're asking me a kasha on me, says Rabbi Yehuda, the Amrei Ki Rabbanan. I hold the Rabbanan. And the Rabbanan are of the opinion that the Gerushin is only chal after the Kiyama Tanai, but not L'mafreya. Now, where is this machlokas Rabbanan and Rebbe? Gufa. Omer Rav Huna, Omer Rebbe, Kol Omer Al Manaska, Omer Me'achshav Dami, Omer Rav Zera, Ki Avida B'Bavel Hav Hamrinon, the Hadi, Omer Rav Huna, Omer Rebbe, Kol Omer Al Manaska, Omer Me'achshav Dami, Pligi Rabbanan. When I was back in Bavel, before I met Rabbi Asi in Eretz Yisrael, I was of the opinion, that's the way they taught it to be, that the Rabbana reject this principle of Kol Omer Al Manaska Omer Me'achshav Dami. But Kisalki Lahas, when I finally made Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael, Ashkeche le Rebbe Asi. I met with Rabbi Asi. He was the Talmud of Rabbi Yochanan in Eretz Yisrael. To Yosef V'Ka'amarla, and he was sitting and teaching Mishmei the Rabbi Yochanan. The name of his Rebbe, Hakol Modu B'Omer Almanas, K'Omer Me'achshav Domi. The principle of Almanas Ki Me'achshav Domi is universally accepted. Lo Nechleku. When did the Chachamim disagree with Rebbe? Ella, only in a case where the Megarish says that the Gerish should be Chal Me'ayom U'Liachar Misa, and the Chachamim vacillate. What was his kavana? Does he want the get to be chal today? And when he said liachar misa, he means a tanai on the Kiddushin that he dies. Or maybe when he says liachar misa, he means to be choser bo. And really he wants the gerish to be chal only liachar misa, and then he can't be megarish because they can get liachar misa. And that's why the Rabbanan considered a safek megureshes, whereas according to Rav Huna, according to Rebbe, it's a vade megureshes. And the Gemara now is going to quote a brisa to support Rabbi Yochanan. V'atanya, we learned in a brisa that if a man gives a get to his wife, me'ayom le'achar misa, get v'eno, get divrei chachamim. It means it's a suffix whether the get is chal at the time of the nesina and she's a full-fledged megureshes, or it's le'achar misa and she's not a megureshes. And that's the sheet of the chachamim. So we don't know if he was choser bo. Whereas Rebbe Omer, because they get, Rebbe doesn't think that he was choser, but rather it's a tanai. So we see clearly from this last brisa that the machlokes between Rebbe and Chachamim is in a case where he was megarish with the language of me'ayom u'liachar misa, but not in general in all tanai. In all tanai, we're always going to assume that he's megarish michayim and kol Omer Almanas Ka'omer Me'achshav Dom. Frek the Gemara, Ul Rabbi Yehuda di Omar Almanas Nami Pligi. We have now a kasha on Rabbi Yehuda. He holds the machlokis. Rabbi Chacham is not a specific machlokis in Me'ayom Lachar Misa, but in general with regard to any Tanai where he says Almanas. Is Ad the Nifli Me'ayom Lachar Misa Nifli Be Almanas? Why did the brisa only bring down the machlokus in the case specifically of Me'ayom Lachar Misa? Why didn't they have machlokus in general about any Megarish al Tanai? And he says Almanas, whatever the Tanai might be, that Rebbe holds the Gerish and a Chal now, and Chachama hold a suffix, whether it's Chal or it's not Chal, whether it's a Tanai or Chazor. And the Gemara answers that even according to Rabbi Yehuda, there's a machloket between Rebbe and Chacham, even in a general case of Megarish B'Tanai, but nevertheless, the Brisa wanted to bring down the machloket in the case of Me'ayom Lachar Misa Kidelo Diacha Kolcho de Rebbe, to tell you how far Rebbe is willing to go. The Me'ayom Lachar Misa Nami Arezege, not only in a general Tanai of Almanas, but even in the case of Me'ayom Lachar Misa, the get is Chal. And even though he said explicitly Lachar Misa, and there's no Gerushin Lachar Misa, nevertheless the get is Chal because he added the word Me'ayom. How much more so in a Gerushin al Tanai, it's as if he said explicitly that the Gerushin should be Chal now. The Gemara is not happy. You're telling me that the Brisa chose Lo Diacha Kocho de Rebbe Niflog Bi Almanas Lo Diacha Kocho de Rabbanon. Why didn't the Brisa bring down a machlokas between the Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda to tell me that even in a regular case of Tanai, the Rabbanon go as far as to say that there's a chashash that maybe the get will only be chal after the kiyama Tanai. And in the case of Me'ayom Lachar Misa, certainly there's a suffix that maybe the get will be chal Lachar Misa, and therefore it's not a get. But now we want to say that even in other cases of Tanai, and the Gemara answers koach that Torah adif. We would rather be mechadesh a chiddush in the matir rather than the oser. Second. And that is that Rebbe holds that the get is chal and she's allowed to get married because we take it as a Tanai. Correct. And not only that, she's no longer Yavam Shuk, right? And that's also B'Torah Vada. The get is Chal B'Torah Vada. However, the Chachamim, that's a Shita of the Osrim, and it's not such a big Chiddush because it's possible that they weren't absolutely convinced one way or the other, and therefore they asked the woman Misafik. Maybe the Megarish had an intention that the Gerish is Michal Lachar Misa and ain't get Lachar Misa, therefore she needs Yibum. So we're going to go in both directions, and we're going to require chalitza. The Mishnah says, mikan v'yad shloshim yom, and therefore he has to deliver the goods within 30 days, otherwise no Kiddushin. Pshita, what's the Kiddush? Ma'od detem alav tnohu. I might have raised the possibility that when he says mikan v'yad shloshim yom, he's not setting up a Tanai, that therefore if he would give her and deliver the money after 30 days, the Kiddushin would be chal. But rather, Lizaruze Kama. She says to him, I want you to deliver the goods as soon as possible. And therefore, in order to be Mizaris him, that he should quickly and urgently be Mekayim the Tanai, in this Havamina, therefore he said, Ad Shloshim Yom. He agreed to her request. And therefore, he never had a Kavanah that he would have to really deliver the goods within 30 days. He could deliver the goods even after 30 days. And the Mishnah had to tell me, no, that af zman nesinas amos that when he says 30 days, it means the most have to be given within that 30-day period. The Mishnah says, he has to show Masayim Zuz in his bank account. So let's say if we're not sure, right? In other words, if we're absolutely sure, let's say two Eidim could testify, here's the bank statement, it's got Masayim Zuz, she's Mekudeshes, but if there's no clear Eidus, then she's not Mekudeshes. She could marry someone else. So maybe he does have. And furthermore, Tanya, we learned in the Bryce Chayshin and Shema Yeshlo. So even in the absence of a positive, definite yediyah through Eidim that he has Masayim Zuz, we should still be choshish for Kiddush. Maybe he has Masayim Zuz. Lo kasha. You're right. As far as Kiddushin Vadi is concerned, then we need Eidim to testify that he has Masayim Zuz. Otherwise, there's no Vada. But as far as Kiddushin Safek are concerned, even if we don't have Eidim, we have to be choshish that maybe he has some Swiss bank account where he has the equivalent of Masayim Zuz. The Mishnah says, Amanasharech Masayim Zuz. How we learned in Tosefta, Shalonis Kavna Eleros Mishalo. It's not enough that he points to Masayim Zuz on the table that belongs to someone else. It's got to be his Masayim Zuz. Mishnah says, Shulchan Einu Mekudesh Pshita, Lo Tzricha, Diafal Gav, Dinoka Tamei, Be'iske. Now, what's Dami Be'iske? This is what's called Arisus. Let me just make sure I got that right. No. Later on, we'll have Arisus. What's Naketle Dami Be'iska? Let's say, for example, I own Masayim Zuz, and I give you the Masayim Zuz to invest it, and you'll get half of the dividends. Those Masayim Zuz don't belong to you yet. You'll get a cut from the dividends after the Revach, after you succeed. And therefore, right now, the Kiddushin is not Chal because he did not show a Masayim Zuz that belonged to him. And he says here in the footnote, even if, let's say, the Iska at this moment in time was already Marviach, if you go on to the market, you'll see it's worth already 400 Zuz, half of which he gets, and that's Masayim Zuz. But nevertheless, he quotes the Sugya B'Metzia Kuf Hey, he doesn't have real bailus over the money. The Mishnah says now, on the bottom of Samach Amid Beis, Amanashi Yeshli Beis Kur Ofar, he says that I am marrying you on the condition that I own a piece of karka which is large enough to plant a kur of tvu, which, if I'm not mistaken, is 75,000 square amos. I don't know. We don't have time to read that now, but is ubilvad sheyeshlo, right? Only if he owns such a large piece of karka, base kur. Amanashi yeshli b'makom ploni. I'm acting on the condition that in a certain place I own karka. If yeshlo bosamokom mekudeshes v'lav ena mekudeshes. Amanash harech base kor ofor. Harezu mekudeshes v'yarenu mishalo. Imhera bibika. Oh, this is going to be the case of an aris. If he shows her in a bika where they have harisim working a bika, ena mekudeshes, because he doesn't own the sod, even though he has harisus, but he doesn't own the sod. Frek the Gemara. Why does it say v'yeshlo in the Mishnah, meaning that there has to be edus brura, that he owns this karka, etc., etc.? V'nechel shema yeshlo, maybe he does own the karka. V'od, and furthermore, Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, chayshin and shema yeshlo. We are chosh, maybe he does have karka. So even in the absence of vada yediyah of edim, we should be choshesh that maybe the Kiddushin is chal lo kasha of kedushay vade of kedushay safek. Enochinami for kedushay vade we need edim. In the absence of Adam, we have to be choshesh. Maybe he does own karka of that size and that value, and therefore it's a safek kiddushin, and that's called kiddushay safek. We already had the Mishnah with regard to Mos when he said Masayim Zuz, and now you're just repeating the same story with regard to karka tzricha. If we only had the Mishnah with regard to Zuzim, then we would say that what? That we don't need edus brura to create a safek kiddushin, mishum davidi and even if we don't have clear-cut edus that he owns Masayim Zuz, maybe he's got them stashed away in a Swiss account. Avol ara ema everybody knows, it's public knowledge that you own a piece of real estate, and therefore she's not going to be even a safek mekudeshes, because how is it possible that he owns karka? We don't know about it. Everybody knows that he owns karka. Therefore, the Tana tells me that even in this particular situation, that we don't know about his karka, it's still a safek mekudeshes. And here we have a machlokas between the Rashba and the Ran. The Rashba says, one second. Wait, where did we get up to? No, we didn't get up to this yet. Almanash yeshli b'makom plonium yeshlo, etc. Pshita ma'odid tema. Even if he has a karka b'makom acher, is amar lo ma'nafkilo lachmina ano atarachno ma'sino lach. If he says in the Havamim that although my karka is b'makom acher, don't worry about that. He says to the she calms it down and he says, you know what? I'm going to plant fruits and vegetables in that far off land, and I'll transport them over to you. That's going to be my headache. And therefore, Lamaisa, at the end of the day, you don't lose anything. The Kiddushin should be chal. She's not going to be makbid. Come mashmalon, no, she's still makbid. And here we have machlokes between the Rashba and the Ran. The Rashba says she will suffer some loss because at some point, she wants to check out the Soda herself. She'll have to take a plane or a train. And machmas richuka kasha le'adov. If, on the other hand, says the Rashba, the Soda was krova, then enochinami the kedusha would be chal. The Ran says no. Even in that situation, it's possible that she will suffer a loss because ritzono yelitayel le'makom rachok yosef. In other words, according to the Ram, we look at the Kiyum Tanai literally, and he said b'mokom ploni. Weiter. Almanasha base kur offer. What's the time that there's no kiyum tanai in the case of bika? Tana, we learned in the Tosefta, shaloniskavnu zu el liros mishalo. V'im hera b'bika ina b'kudeshes pshita lo tzricha denokit b'distura. So distura is the Aramaic parallel to our risus, and he's working for the Bala Karka, and he gets his wages. For his wages, he gets paid by owning part of the payros. And since he owns part of the payros, he would say that he has a kinyan in the Gufa Karka, the payros, and that's arisus. And therefore, it's not so poshut that that she didn't want to marry him in this case, because maybe she would marry him even if he doesn't own that karka, but he has rights of arisus in the karka. And this is where we're going to stop now on the bottom of Daf Samach Omid Beis, and we're up to the din of Hegdish. Okay then, so let me wish you a good night, and tomorrow it all depends on how much time I get to prepare, but hopefully we could start a little bit earlier than normally. I don't know if I could be ready by 7:30. Let's see what I can accomplish tonight when I come back from my night seder at about 10:30. Okay then? Call to.